The corridors of Capitol Hill were quieter than usual that morning, but not because of a lack of activity. Something had shifted. Whispers followed Karoline Leavitt as she strode through the hallways with purpose, her heels clicking like a metronome of defiance. In one hand, she carried a slim red folder. In the other, her phone buzzed non-stop. Conservative donors, grassroots supporters, and even a few former skeptics had all taken notice of what she was about to do. The night before, she'd been handed a dossier. Not just any document dump, this was compiled testimony, transaction records, burner phone logs, and email attachments that, until now, had been locked behind sealed court records and hidden under layers of legal red tape. Someone on the inside had cracked it open, and that someone trusted Karoline more than they trusted Congress. At the same time, just 3 floors above her, Hunter Biden was being ushered into a side room by 2 of his attorneys. Dressed in a crisp designer suit and wearing the sunglasses of someone who still believed the rules didn't apply to him, he walked like a man who thought every scandal was survivable, as long as you had the right friends in high places. Karoline didn't knock. She entered the hearing room without invitation, and every camera snapped to her the moment she did. The House Oversight Committee wasn't expecting her until next week, and certainly not with anything in her hands. The chairman, visibly surprised, looked down at the schedule. This wasn't protocol. But Karoline didn't need protocol. Hunter turned from the table, irritated by the interruption. He had been mid-sentence, spinning a line about privacy violations and unfair targeting. When he saw her, his jaw tightened. He leaned into the mic and growled. "You're a nobody. You don't even belong in this room." The room fell silent. Karoline didn't flinch. She walked straight to the center of the room, locked eyes with him, and pulled out a single sheet of paper from the red folder. She held it up high, a subpoena, stamped and signed. Then she said, with chilling calm, "You don't get to define who belongs here. The Constitution does. And today, you're answering to it." Gasps erupted. The chair pounded the gavel. Hunter leaned back, rattled. The cameras caught it all. Karoline handed the subpoena to the clerk, turned back toward the cameras, and let a small, deliberate smile cross her face. The showdown had begun. The headlines exploded within minutes. Karoline Leavitt served subpoena Liv. Hunter Biden caught off guard, was already trending on X. CNN scrambled to reframe the footage, MSNBC cut away mid-broadcast, and yet, the video was already out in full, raw and uncut, spreading like wildfire across conservative and independent channels alike. Karoline walked out of the chamber, flanked by a small team of aides, her expression unreadable but her pace sharp, deliberate. She wasn't there for drama. She was there for answers. Behind her, the committee room had erupted. Representative Jamie Raskin objected loudly, claiming the subpoena was unauthorized. Hunter's lawyers demanded a recess, shouting about procedural violations. But Karoline knew exactly what she was doing. She had gone through the correct channels. The oversight subcommittee she sat on had granted her the authority after weeks of strategic preparation. As she walked into the press scrum outside the chamber, a CNN reporter pushed forward, mic shaking, voice raised. "Karoline, don't you think this was a stunt?" Karoline turned, eyes steely. "A stunt?" she said, lifting the folder again. "A stunt is flying to Ukraine with hush money in your coat pocket. A stunt is pretending the American people can't read a balance sheet. This," she held up the subpoena again, "is a reckoning." Inside the building, Hunter sat in stunned silence as his attorney whispered frantically in his ear. But it wasn't just the subpoena that had shaken him. It was the way Karoline had locked eyes with him, calm, unbothered, and completely unafraid. He wasn't used to that. Not from D.C. Not from the press. And certainly not from someone younger, outside his circles, and uncontrolled by the usual power brokers. He tried to brush it off. Leaning back in the chair, he gave a smirk to the room and said into the mic, "They're trying to smear me again. Same old playbook." But outside, Karoline had already laid out the next move. She handed out copies of redacted financial transfers to a group of reporters, not to leak them, but to show she wasn't bluffing. The documents outlined exact amounts, destination accounts, and shell companies tied to Burisma and other questionable entities. They weren't conclusions. They were questions with names and dates, and Karoline was demanding answers. She looked directly into the camera. The American people don't deserve excuses. They deserve clarity. Mr. Biden will testify. Not behind closed doors. Not filtered by handlers. He'll answer under oath. That line was clipped and reposted by nearly every major outlet within hours. The balance of power was shifting. Karoline wasn't waiting for permission. She was carving her own path through the smoke. And Hunter Biden? For the first time in a long time, he looked rattled. By the next morning, the White House was in full containment mode. "This is political theater," Karine Jean-Pierre said during the press briefing. "A desperate ploy by a far-right extremist to distract from real issues facing Americans." But even as she spoke, the full clip of Karoline slapping the subpoena on Hunter's folder played on loop in the background of every conservative media outlet and was already dissected on thousands of TikTok and Instagram reels, not just by political junkies, but by everyday Americans who saw something that rang true. The clip wasn't polished. It wasn't staged. But it felt real. While most young leaders played it safe, Karoline had walked into a room full of cameras, surrounded by legacy power, and said, "Let's talk accountability." And now, they were scrambling to spin it. Later that day, Hunter's legal team released a written statement. "Mr. Biden has nothing to hide. This is yet another smear campaign to damage the president's family by partisan actors. We will not participate in manufactured drama." But the message fell flat. Because in Karoline's hands, this wasn't about smear. It was about receipts. She appeared on Newsmax that evening, calm and composed. The anchor asked her what made her so confident she could take on the president's son. Karoline didn't flinch. "Because I don't owe anyone in Washington a favor," she said. "They call it a witch hunt, but they won't open the books. They scream transparency, but only behind tinted glass. The American people deserve more than sound bites. They deserve honesty. And if Hunter Biden has nothing to hide, he should say it under oath." The comment ricocheted across social media. Even some moderate voices began to shift. Independents, libertarians, and disillusioned Democrats started asking, "If Hunter's clean, why not just show up?" CNN ran a piece titled, "Karoline Leavitt's Unorthodox Tactics, Reckless or Revolutionary?" The framing was skeptical, but the conclusion was clear: she wasn't backing down. That same night, someone from Hunter's circle leaked an internal memo, suggesting that behind the scenes, there was deep concern about financial exposure, especially involving previously redacted wire transfers and emails from 2015 to 2017. One name came up repeatedly in the documents Karoline had revealed: Rosemont Seneca. Karoline's move had shifted the terrain. This wasn't just a personal clash anymore. It was turning into a constitutional confrontation. And the Biden camp knew it. The leaked memo hit harder than anyone anticipated. By noon the next day, a verified account on X, formerly Twitter, posted screenshots of internal Biden legal team chats. While portions were blurred, enough of the text was clear. If that folder she dropped contains the July 2017 wire notes, we're looking at a PR nightmare. And worse. She has the list. That word sent political Twitter into a frenzy. What list? Speculation roared to life. Congressional insiders whispered about a confidential White House visitor log from the Obama era that had never been fully released. Others pointed to a buried set of emails connecting foreign business interests to Hunter's consulting work, emails Karoline may have acquired through an anonymous House staffer months ago. Karoline said nothing directly. She didn't need to. Instead, she tweeted a single line: "Truth is not a threat. Unless you're hiding it." She attached a photo, not of her, but of the Constitution laid across a marble table, flanked by a sealed white folder. No caption. No filter. That image was shared 1.3 million times in 6 hours. Back at the Capitol, panic met fury. Democrats accused her of grandstanding. One senior House member even called her tactics a reckless display of showmanship unfit for a serious investigation. But behind closed doors, committee leaders were scrambling. They weren't just dealing with Karoline, they were dealing with a movement now glued to her every word. Americans flooded C-SPAN's inbox with messages demanding televised hearings. Young people on TikTok began reenacting her folder drop-in parody videos, mocking power but praising bravery. Even some establishment Republicans, initially cautious of her tactics, began backing her call for full subpoena enforcement. Senator Kennedy, never one to mince words, told Fox, "That girl may be 20-something, but she's dragging D.C. into the light faster than anyone else." By Thursday, Hunter's attorneys requested a closed-door negotiation. Karoline refused. In a brief appearance outside her office, she faced reporters with cameras in every direction and said, "If Hunter Biden wants to defend his name, he's welcome to do it in the open, under oath, with the American people watching." Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Because this isn't about me. It's about what they think you'll never find out." The crowd erupted. One mic was left hot as a CNN anchor whispered, "She's not just playing politics. She's flipping the table." Friday morning, fog hovered low over Washington. Karoline stood alone on the Capitol steps, a manila envelope in her hand. No cameras, no entourage, just a single press photographer who happened to be there early. She looked directly at him and said, "You might want to get this shot." She raised the envelope just high enough to show the official red stamp. Subpoena delivered. Inside was a federal summons, signed and sealed, for Robert Hunter Biden. Date, the following Tuesday. Location, House Oversight Committee, Room 2141. By noon, the photo was everywhere. It was no longer a leak. It was no longer speculation. It was real. The Biden legal team scrambled. One aide reportedly yelled in a closed meeting, "She's forcing the president's son to testify in front of the country." Hunter's attorneys pleaded for delay. They cited medical reasons, mental health concerns, even unforeseen travel obligations. Karoline responded with one line, "The truth doesn't travel. It shows up." Within hours, social media was boiling. Hashtags like #subpoena delivered and #Karoline1tblink were trending globally. Fox News ran it wall to wall. CNN, under pressure, devoted a full hour. Even MSNBC, previously skeptical of her, ran a tense panel where one analyst admitted, "Whether you like her or not, she's driving the narrative now." That afternoon, Karoline was stopped by a journalist outside a Capitol Hill cafe. "Do you really expect Hunter to show up?" he asked. Karoline sipped her coffee, turned to him, and said calmly, "I expect every American to respect the law. Even the president's family." She paused, then added, "If he doesn't, I'll read the evidence myself, line by line, before the whole country." By 4 p.m., her statement was viral. A new graphic spread across social media, Karoline, holding the Constitution in one hand and the subpoena in the other, photoshopped lightning behind her. It was dramatic, over the top. She never reposted it, but she liked it. Meanwhile, House security staff began preparing for a packed committee room. Every major network requested seats. Congressional aides whispered that a few Democrats were considering skipping the hearing altogether to avoid the blowback. Karoline didn't care. She wasn't just inviting the storm. She was walking into it. The Biden camp moved fast, but not fast enough. As Saturday morning sunlight poured over D.C., Karoline Leavitt's office released an official press statement. The title was one word, confirmed. Inside, it read, "Robert Hunter Biden will testify under oath before the House Oversight Committee on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Failure to appear will result in escalation as provided by law." No spin, no fanfare. Just the facts. And that's what terrified the White House. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Hunter's lawyer, Abbe Lowell, reportedly told his staff, We should have negotiated. Now we're stuck playing her game. President Biden, according to a senior aide who spoke anonymously, was visibly upset when told that Karoline had refused all private negotiation offers. "Can't she be reasoned with?" he asked. "No, sir," the aide replied. "She doesn't want a deal. She wants daylight." By noon, Karoline was already 2 steps ahead. She walked out of a closed-door strategy session with a manila folder in hand and gave a brief statement to the media. No more hiding behind press teams and legal briefs. On Tuesday, the American people will hear the truth from the man at the center of it all. And if he lies, he'll perjure himself. On the record. A Fox reporter shouted after her, "Karoline, do you have more documents?" She turned, paused, and with a faint smile said, "More than documents. We have receipts." That line was clipped, captioned, and viral in under 30 minutes. Sunday night, MSNBC ran a special. They tried to frame it as Republican overreach. But even their panelists looked rattled. One analyst, unprompted, blurted out, "She's doing what even Comer and Jordan didn't. She's making it personal, and it's working." The next morning, protesters began forming outside the Capitol. Some carried signs. "Karoline for truth. Biden's nightmare wears heels. Subpoena the corruption." But across the street, a smaller group waved signs defending Hunter. One woman shouted, "He's a private citizen. Leave him alone." Karoline heard it as she exited a town car. She didn't flinch. She simply raised the folder, looked the woman directly in the eye, and said, "If he's private, why did he take public money?" That line? It echoed. And cameras caught every syllable. Tuesday was set. The room was reserved. The networks were prepared. The subpoenas were live. And Karoline Leavitt was ready for the hearing that could define her legacy, or burn it all down. But one thing was certain, she would not blink. Tuesday morning in Washington was unusually still. But inside the Rayburn House office building, a storm was brewing. Security was tighter than usual. News vans lined the block. Journalists whispered like it was Vatican conclave. Everyone was waiting, for him, for her, for the reckoning. At exactly 9:58 a.m., Karoline Leavitt entered the Oversight Committee hearing room. She wore a white blazer, symbolic, crisp, unyielding. No notes. No entourage. Just a thin folder in her right hand and a stare that cut through the buzzing room like a scalpel. Reporters rose to their feet. Cameras clicked like 1,000 metronomes. And yet Karoline didn't blink. She didn't wave. She didn't acknowledge the spectacle. She sat down, centered her nameplate, and waited. Hunter Biden arrived 8 minutes later, flanked by 2 attorneys and a public relations handler who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He scanned the room. Then he saw her. Karoline didn't stand. She didn't smile. She simply raised her eyes and nodded once, slowly. It was less greeting, more verdict. Hunter's face tightened. The chairman gavelled the hearing to order. Flashbulbs exploded. And the American people leaned in. Karoline was the third member to speak, but the first to shift the room. She didn't waste time. She didn't clear her throat or pontificate. She opened the folder, held up the document inside, and said, "Mr. Biden, on April 6 of last year, you claimed you had no knowledge of your associates receiving foreign payments tied to energy contracts. This document proves otherwise. Would you like to amend your statement now or risk perjuring yourself?" Gasps, murmurs, audible scoffs. Hunter's attorney leaned forward, whispering furiously. Hunter looked up, voice low and defensive. "I don't recognize that document." Karoline smiled. "That's funny. Your signature's right here." She turned the page to the camera. The signature was unmistakable. A collective hush fell over the room. One C-SPAN mic even picked up a whispered "O.S.T** from a staffer off-screen. And that was just the beginning. Karoline proceeded to grill him, not as a politician, but as a prosecutor. Meticulous. Cold. Unrelenting. She cited travel logs, wire transfers, public statements, photos. At one point, she turned to the committee chair and said, "I request this hearing be entered into the permanent record as the first official admission that Hunter Biden misled the American people, knowingly." The chairman nodded. The gavel came down. And history recorded the moment. Outside, protesters had multiplied. Chants echoed across the plaza. But inside the hearing room, no one made a sound. Because Karoline Leavitt hadn't just questioned a man. She'd cross-examined the son of a sitting president, and walked out stronger. By the time the hearing went into recess, the clip had already gone viral. Millions watched it on loop, Karoline's steady voice, the way she held the document just high enough for every camera to catch it, and Hunter's squirming reply. Networks tried to spin it. MSNBC downplayed it. Fox played it every 10 minutes. Twitter, or X, as it was now known, erupted with hashtags. #LeaveIt's Biden, #Subpoena Queen, and the more brutal one trending on Truth Social, #Hunter Humiliated. But Karoline wasn't done. She stepped out of the hearing room and into the rotunda, flanked by a single aide and 2 Capitol Police escorts. Reporters swarmed her. "Ms. Leavitt, what's your response to the White House statement that these are baseless accusations?" She didn't stop walking. But her voice cut through the noise. "If they're baseless, why is the signature real? Why are the payments real? Why did he flinch?" Another reporter shouted. "Are you suggesting the president knew about these dealings?" Karoline paused. Turned to face the press corps. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm proving everything." Then she raised her hand and held up the subpoena, an official House Oversight Committee demand for additional documentation from Hunter Biden, including digital correspondence, bank records, and travel logs. The cameras went wild. It was no longer just a story. It was a war. That evening, the White House released a carefully worded denial. They called Karoline's actions grandstanding, said she was exploiting her platform for political theater. Karoline responded, on camera, in front of a flag and a Constitution plaque. "You call it theater. I call it accountability. The American people don't need a cover story. They need the truth. And I will keep asking until someone answers under oath." That clip? It outpaced the original by morning. In Delaware, Hunter's team was in full damage control. Leaks began circulating that he might plead the Fifth in future hearings. His legal team floated the idea of invoking executive privilege, only to be swiftly corrected by legal scholars on every channel. He's not the president, they reminded the country. He's a citizen. And citizens answer subpoenas. Karoline had changed the tone of the investigation. Before her moment, it had been a slow churn of vague language and redacted PDFs. Now, the game had names, documents, timestamps, and a face. Meanwhile, Karoline flew back to New Hampshire for a town hall. Her flight landed to applause at the terminal. A retired Marine handed her a folded Constitution. A mom in tears told her she finally felt seen. That night, standing on a firehouse stage, Karoline addressed the packed crowd. "If you or I lied to Congress, they'd lock us up. Why should a president's son get a pass? I don't care how powerful your last name is. If you break the law, America still means something." The room roared. Even the fire chief clapped from the back row. And Karoline? She just nodded. Then said, "This isn't over." By Friday morning, the Biden legal team had gone dark. No press releases. No statements. No tweets. Instead, the media had begun doing the talking for them, and the story wasn't going their way. CNN aired a reluctant panel where even Democratic analysts admitted she brought receipts. The New York Times printed an op-ed with the headline, Hunter Biden's silence is speaking too loudly. But Karoline wasn't waiting for the headlines to catch up. She was already in Washington. This time, she didn't walk into the Oversight Committee alone. She walked in holding another file, thicker than the last, and the room tensed before she even reached her seat. Hunter Biden, whose legal team had requested a delay, was conspicuously absent. And Karoline made sure to open her remarks with that fact. The American people showed up today. But once again, the Bidens didn't. That single line landed like a hammer. She opened the file. More banking logs. A chain of Venmo and wire transfers. Burisma board payouts. Flights billed to shell corporations. And, most damaging of all, a series of texts retrieved through subpoena showing what appeared to be coordination between Hunter and White House staffers regarding foreign engagements. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The chairman paused the session. Staffers huddled. Phones buzzed. Karoline just sat still, hands folded. Letting the truth hang in the air. That night, back at her office, Karoline reviewed the headlines. This time, even the left-leaning publications couldn't spin it. Politico ran, "Leavitt drops bombshell on Hunter case." Axios posted a live timeline titled, "What We Know Now." And the Department of Justice? They were suddenly reviewing the new disclosures. Karoline leaned back in her chair. She wasn't celebrating. She was calculating. Because she knew what came next. She issued a public challenge to Hunter Biden on Fox News that evening. Come to the hearing. Take the oath. If you're innocent, prove it. It wasn't a threat. It was a dare. And it landed. The next morning, the White House press secretary stood stiff at the podium. "We will not respond to politically motivated stunts." Karoline's team interrupted with a release of the full transcript and document file she'd submitted, already uploaded to a secure public server. Within hours, tens of thousands of Americans had downloaded the evidence. Conservative influencers called it the People's PDF. Even apolitical users on Reddit shared charts breaking down the funds. What had started as a fiery clip had become a movement. Back at her home office in New Hampshire, Karoline stared at the Constitution hanging on the wall. Next to it, she taped the first subpoena she ever issued. And beside that? An empty spot. Waiting for Hunter's signed testimony. The morning of the hearing dawned overcast in D.C. But the air outside the Capitol was electric. A crowd had gathered, not protesters, not tourists, but Americans holding signs that read, "One standard for all. Hunter, testify. No one is above the law." Inside, Karoline sat at the long committee table, composed, a small stack of papers at her left hand. Her team stood behind her, eyes locked on the door. At exactly 9:02 a.m., it opened. Hunter Biden walked in. No cameras. No entourage. Just him, eyes slightly downcast, his lawyer flanking him like a shadow. The chamber stirred like a hive. Even veteran members of Congress straightened in their seats. Karoline didn't flinch. She rose, nodded once, and took the floor. "Mr. Biden, I thank you for appearing today," she began, her voice crisp. "You're not here because of politics. You're here because there are questions, serious ones, that the American people deserve answers to." Hunter shifted in his seat. Karoline opened the folder. But this time, she didn't read. She looked directly at him. "Do you deny receiving payments through Burisma while your father was vice president? Do you deny routing those funds through LLCs tied to your consulting firm? Do you deny using the vice president's name to broker private meetings with foreign officials?" Each question struck like a gavel. Hunter's lawyer interjected. But the chairman overruled. "Let her speak." Karoline reached into her folder and held up a printed page, color-coded bank wires. Then another, screenshots of WhatsApp messages, and finally, a signed invoice from a Chinese energy firm dated during Joe Biden's vice presidency. She turned to the chamber. This isn't about shame. It's about accountability. If your name were Smith, or Johnson, or any other, you'd have been subpoenaed long ago. The room fell still. Hunter's face was blank. His lawyer leaned in and whispered. The microphones picked up just one phrase. We're invoking the Fifth. Karoline didn't react. She turned, picked up the Constitution from the table, and held it high. You have that right. But so do we, the right to demand truth. The right to defend this republic. And with that, she sat. Outside, the crowd erupted. Not in protest, but in applause. On Twitter, the clip went viral. Karoline vs. Hunter, trended #1. Fox ran a cheerin', Constitution vs. corruption. But Karoline said nothing more that day. She simply walked out of the chamber, handed the evidence packet to a waiting DOJ staffer, and disappeared down the marble hallway. She didn't need to say another word. The truth had spoken. And the storm had only just begun. This fight was never about me. It was about every forgotten American who watched the rules bend for the powerful. If Hunter Biden can laugh off subpoenas while hardworking families face audits over pennies, then justice has lost its name, but not today. Today, the Constitution walked back into that chamber. And it didn't ask for permission.